Yeah, welcome back to Talk Norwich City, everyone. Now, these are becoming quite a regular thing now, which is very exciting. It's Connor Southwell joining myself, Jack Reeve, to take a look back at what ended up being a rather busy January transfer window. It was kind of rumbling on and not too much was happening. And then Connor was made very busy on deadline day. It was a proper deadline day. I said in my video the other day, Connor, that actually deadline day has become quite a non-event for me. Nothing really happens of excitement, and if things do happen regarding Norwich City, it's often not for good reason. But it feels different this time around. Let's go through, I guess, the deadline day business, and we can work backwards. The man that kept you on your toes, and I suspect has contributed to slight bags under your eyes, is that of Jacob Wright. He joins from Manchester City. He's a central kind of defensive midfielder. So we finally replaced Alexander Tete after about 17 years. Talk us through this, man. There's excitement around the place.
Yeah, there is. And, I think it's probably worth painting a picture first and foremost of how it all unfolded and what it was like and how late it actually was, because I spent sort of the afternoon between about 2 and 4 at the Nest as, there was a community sports foundation event. They were opening some brilliant new facilities, the store and the box, which Jack Wilshere was there, goalkeeping coach Tony Roberts was there. So it was a good chance to go down and sort of look at these facilities and speak to them, speak to the CSFs, Ian Thornton as well, about the great work they're doing. And very much the mood music at that point was it was going to be very quiet, and we obviously had a live blog going, and you have to follow the whole day through. So I'd sort of been designated the late shift. I had my pajamas on, my slippers were on, I had a cup of tea in hand, thinking this is lovely. It'll get to 11. I'll be asleep by 11:15. That was the hope. Might be a couple of sort of development loans on the outside, but nothing too major. And that was certainly the mood music until probably about 7-8 o'clock, when it was clear that they sensed an opportunity with Jacob Wright and were trying to do that deal. And it probably caught all of us by surprise, because Johannes obviously made clear earlier in the month that he wanted a defensive midfielder. I think it was one that was definitely on a long-term target list. There was obviously the Jonathan Varane situation last January where Norwich were trying to sign him. He obviously went to QPR in the summer, and it felt probably increasingly like it was going to be more one that they were going to pick up and park probably until the summer window. But this was probably the situation all along, really. If one of those targets became available and there was a real opportunity of doing the deal, they would do it. And actually, the lateness that it all kicked off and unfolded probably contributed to them being able to do this deal. Because he was very, very close to going to Swansea in a slightly different package deal. That would have been a loan with an obligation. The fact that he then decided that wasn't the best place for him then opened up the window for Norwich City to negotiate a loan with an option, which was the sort of structured deal that they wanted. So, it was a late night, one that I thought was going to end relatively early for a deadline day. Kept me up until the early hours of the morning, but hey, as you say, they're the most exciting ones. So it was good fun to follow and to cover. Now, sitting after it wasn't at the time. I was struggling.
It's disappointing to know that you were wearing pajamas rather than sort of a yellow tie and a three-piece suit, Connor. But we can leave that to the imagination of the viewers. In terms, because I think the last time we spoke, we'd heard the comments from Johannes, and we didn't quite know what his motive was around saying that he thought that the squad was lacking a defensive midfielder. And you'd kind of said, and the general vibe around the place was maybe Norwich are just waiting until the summer to find the ideal target, and potentially that wasn't an option in the January market. And that left me a slight feeling of glumness. It felt like we were not kind of passively watching the season go by, but that was at a stage where there was still injuries. I think Norwich had lost a couple of games. It felt like the season was kind of dwindling into the abyss a little bit. But was Jacob Wright always a target for Norwich City, or was it someone where they acted late and just felt like they needed bodies in and around the place?
No, I think that's the perception, isn't it? When you do something that late and you go to do a bit of business, that it's because you feel you're a bit short, or there's an opportunity that you think just is unmissable. But actually, it was calculated from a Norwich perspective. This is somebody that I'm led to believe they've watched for more than 6 months. To give you an indication, he was very high up on their list. I think probably the recruitment team were watching him longer than that 6 months. But in terms of actually being a name on a list and very high up a list, that's been sort of a 6-month long thing. And, clearly to do something like that at this stage, as sort of Johannes has outlined and as Ben Napper has sort of shown, I guess, with the business that they've done, it has to be right. Probably similarly with the centre back situation, it wasn't one that actively they were planning to do this month, but events did boy events, as they say, and things get sort of streamlined. And if you have an opportunity to do something and you can beat competition and you can get them in 6 months earlier than you planned, then do it. And Norwich are now in a financial position where they're able to do that, whereas they weren't previously. So I can understand maybe why the perception is that this was, a little bit of a panic and a little bit rushed, but it was anything but that, really. This is someone they've liked for a long time, have watched for a long time, and delighted to have got at this stage, and maybe even surprised themselves that they've been able to do it. And sometimes those are the best ones. So I think there's a lot of excitement around him. He's clearly got good pedigree, England's youth international, captained Manchester City in their sort of academies, and a holding midfielder. And as you said at the start, that's a position that Norwich City have been crying out for a long time. I felt it was a little bit of a hole they left after the summer. It's really only, you think of their midfield options, it's only, I know Nunez has played there and played there quite well on occasion, but it's only really Kenny McLean that they've got as that six. And just to give him a little bit of depth and competition and support, and I think Wright can play a little bit higher up as well. With the injuries that they've had, I think an extra body makes a lot of sense. So I think there'll be a lot of fans really, really happy that they've added a bit of depth and a bit of competition in that area of the pitch.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll see throughout this video that there's a pattern trending with the kind of profile of these signings. Young is one of them. Jacob Wright, 19 years old. Let's move on to Rory Mcconville, who comes in from Brighton, also 19 years old, tall, commanding centre-back. Everyone was sort of saying, oh, can you remember him coming on against Norwich in the Brighton game? And I think I'd switched off by that point, so I can't really recall it. But I think that was his senior debut for Brighton. Again, very young, highly rated. This one felt like it came out of nowhere as well.
Yeah, it did. And like you, I think probably similarly with Slimani earlier in the season, you've sat there going, God, I wish I paid a little bit more attention. But obviously, none of us know. If we did that every week, you'd have lists as long as your arm of players that Norwich could potentially sign. Yeah, again, really interesting one, because clearly they had other options. They were looking at, Emmanuel Fernandez at Peterborough, had a bid accepted for him, did a lot of work on him. Again, a long-term situation that sort of came to fruition very, very late. We're talking sort of the final 10 days of the window or so that they really sort of stepped up, trying to sign a centre-back. That was partially, I think, because they wanted to, and Brad Hills wanted to go out on loan, and they were quite happy to let him out on loan. So then it was a case of whether they could look at someone. I think you can see from those two options, Fernandez and McConville, what they were looking for. It was a tall, ball-playing, homegrown option as well. I know there's a few other centre backs they looked further down the pyramid at that maybe weren't homegrown quota, and that's probably why they got filtered out ultimately. So really interesting one, because it felt like it was going to be Fernandez probably all the way. I think there was, I know obviously there was some personal term issues, but I think the lad himself had a few difficulties in terms of agency and who he was being represented by, and that's not to say it was the wrong people. It was just probably no people at some point. So you've got a situation where he and people around him, family members, are maybe trying to negotiate a contract for him, which isn't an ideal situation to be. It can get quite complicated and quite messy, and I think probably Norwich decided that in the end it was worth perhaps moving on to something else when it gets sort of that complicated. And Rory Mcconville is the option they've gone for, and you can see why. And all I really remember from him playing at Carrow Road is him coming on and thinking, blimey, he's a big lad. Yeah. But clearly you can see the logic there in terms of someone that's come through Brighton's academy, is clearly going to have the technical proficiency they want in a Johannes Hoftorp system. You can kind of see the plan in terms of looking at Shane Duffy and looking at his age. He enters the final year of his contract next summer. It doesn't really align with the strategy to go and offer him a new one. That's not to say they won't, but clearly it would be a short-term one if that was the case. And he's done very, very well this season, as we all know. He's been fantastic for Norwich, but clearly you do have to start thinking about kind of long-term solutions. And the opportunity to do that, I think the price that they've got him for as well, £1 million up front, is looks a little bit of a bargain really for a fully fledged now international that is very highly rated at a Premier League club. And clearly that situation was allowed to happen because Brighton brought in cash in from Derby for a lot of money, so his pathway was blocked. So all of these things, and we talk about how fluid transfer windows are, you have to, it's events and events and events that lead to a player becoming available. And again, this is one that I think they've liked for a long period of time, and probably the way it works for a recruitment team is they have a big database of players. They watch a load of players for a long time, and then it's a case of, right, what player fits where we're at the moment. If they've got a homegrown ball player, young, right, okay, we've got these options here that are then presented to Ben Napper and Johannes Oftarup, and then kind of a short list is made from there. So he's someone that they've watched for a period of time, maybe was viewed as a little bit unattainable for a long period of that. And clearly now sort of the planets have aligned to get him in. So yeah, I think this one's a really shrewd addition, actually. Of the two options, of my personal opinion, I'm sort of glad they've ended up going down this road, because he's younger, he's an international, he's got better pedigree, really, I think, from my perspective, than Fernandes. He's cheaper as well than Fernandes would have been. So all of that probably makes you feel like, in terms of what Norwich want right now, which is a bit of depth and someone that allows Brad Hills to go out on loan with probably a high ceiling, I think it's a really shrewd bit of business.
And if we're talking about patterns, I mean, age is, of course, one of them. The other is the education that a lot of these players have had. Elite academies, often, Premier League academies. I mean, that kind of fits the bill of. I mean, I've thought about it a lot this season, but when I was stood in the away end at Watford last week, I thought it's a really difficult style for these, particularly the defenders, to play. They are expected to do so much, and often mistakes will creep in. So I guess it's so important, Connor, that these guys are seriously well educated. I mean, it sounds stupid saying like in that area of the game, but if we want this style to work, and if we want it to work on a consistent basis, these are the types that it's going to take to make that happen.
Definitely, it's about profiles, isn't it? And it's about finding the right profile for what you want. If you're going to play out from the back, there's no point getting centre backs who maybe kick it and head it and don't do a lot else. You need those ball players and those players who are comfortable on the ball. And you look at McConville, you use the word education. You look at the education he's had at Brighton. That's a club clearly that tries to replicate how it plays at first team level all the way down. So as a very young man, he will be very used to handling the ball in tight situations, and someone that hopefully, when put in the sort of situations that Johannes Oftarup wants his defenders to be put in, sort of knows and has the experience, and not experience in terms of age or games, but the experience of situations. He knows when he's given the ball from the goalkeeper and he's got someone pressing him from the right or from the left, he knows that there's an option to play into midfield, or vice versa. He's seen those pictures before because that's what he's grown up used to. So I think, again, this shows probably an alignment between what Norwich City are trying to do from their recruitment perspective to what they're trying to do from a coaching perspective, and that's encouraging. When you boil it down and you strip it all back, football's quite simple in terms of you have to choose a strategy, you have to hire people to implement that strategy, and then you have to recruit to that strategy. A lot of clubs struggle with one of those three steps. Norwich have really struggled with a lot of those steps in recent years. The fact now that we're probably seeing a coherence between what the strategy is, the people who are leading that, and then the players that they're signing, I think that should be really encouraging to Norwich City fans. And that's not to say that McConville comes in and has an instant impact, because I think, given the form of Duffy and Doyle, none of us would expect him to be an instant option. But come pre-season, come the summer, there's a situation there where he can really stake his claim and try and push himself, and is clearly someone that, if they need to call upon, will know, if he's dropped into a situation, the type of game model that they want, the type of style of play they want. And that's probably what I felt they suffered with a little bit in the first half of the season. They were making changes and they're bringing on players who are very good players in their own right, but maybe aren't the right profiles to be dropped into a Torup team to offer that sort of stability and level of continuity, I guess, of performance, which is why Norwich looked really good for 60 minutes and then maybe a little less so for 30. So yeah, the signings of Wright, McConville, obviously the others that they've made in this month, hopefully will help them retain that sort of style of play for longer in games. I think that's probably the hope, with obviously an eye to the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, there were 5 kind of senior permanent signings in senior players brought in over the January. We've covered Wright, we've covered McConville. I mean, we've talked about Mate Jurasek before. I just wanted to kind of touch on him again. We'll see him. Well, he should be in the squad for the first time against Derby on Saturday. It feels like an exciting few weeks for Norwich. You've got Sainz coming back. You've hopefully got Nunes coming back. Anis Ben Slimane. We'll see a couple of these new faces. So it feels like almost chapter 2 in the season is very much here. We've obviously seen the kind of movings and shakings at boardroom and ownership level over the past 12 months. Are we starting to see the influence of the Atanasios, and I say influence, and also the financial influence of those guys? They've spent close to £10 million in January, which is a significant chunk at Championship level. It feels like that process is very much starting to kind of whir away now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's certainly the first window. I was trying to think about this Monday, actually. It's probably the first window for a little while where it's been Norwich City strengthening and investing without the sort of necessary or the necessary evil, I guess, of selling a major asset to fund that. That hasn't been the case this month. They've not, they've kept hold of Sargent and Sainz and Nunez probably as well, and others, and yet they've still been able to invest the real money into some real talent. And that is the way they see these players. They see that and they are presented to the Atanasio group as investments. Look, this is a guy that, he's worth £5.8 million now, but if we get him in and we coach him, he could be worth significantly more than that. So, yeah, I think it has been probably a window that's a little bit of a sea change in that regard, because we've not really seen that even in the summer, where they did go and commit 8.5 million on Anti-Cianats and spent money on 4 on Cordoba and Forson and whatnot. That was done with Gabriel Sarro and Jonathan Rowe and Adam Eder leaving, so you had a little bit of money there. And I think the summer will be the same again. They doesn't mean they're not going to sell players, but I think it now means that they can take sporting decisions rather than financial decisions, and that's a really good place to be in, particularly in the Championship, because it means that, let's say in January, if your squad isn't quite where it needs to be, or, there's a little bit of depth, or, the situation that we mapped out, long-term targets suddenly become available at the drop of a hat, you're in a position there where you can act. You don't need to sell a player, and it just removes, I guess, one of the obstacles to doing business and signing some of your targets. And yeah, it's a really subtle, small change, but it makes a hell of a difference, because, as you say, it now means Norwich are in a position where you're looking at the players coming back, you're looking at the players coming in, and suddenly it feels like Norwich City have got not just depth, but quality and strength in depth. And that certainly wasn't the case at the start of the month. So, I think we are slowly but surely beginning to see probably the turning of the wheel, and maybe that slight shift of strategy to an extent, and obviously the funding that comes with that. And I think if I'm a Norwich City fan at the moment, with the run that they're on and the games that they've got ahead and the players coming back and the signings made, I think it's hard to be anything but really excited, and that is the sort of mood that we haven't felt for a long time at this football club. So it's really positive, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously seen Lewis Dobbin and really like the look of him. Anis Ben Slimani, we know all about now, and that's been made a permanent deal, which I think is another good bit of business. Let's talk about the run and what the potential and the opportunity is now from now until the end of the season. I think we spoke after the away, or it was before or after the away matches to Sheffield United and Leeds, and that felt like a particularly tough week for Norwich. We had the cup game against Brighton before that as well. It was very much just, for me, it felt like a damage limitation. Let's just try and get through this with, limbs still attached and bodies still alive. And since that point, a convincing win against a fairly, all over the place Swansea City, and a good away win at Watford in a performance that we've not seen too often from Norwich. And now, as you say, players coming back, new faces in. You've got a double header coming up this week at Carrow Road. You've got the same again in the middle of March. It feels now like there's a pack of 10 games. We saw West Brom losing. We've seen Blackburn losing in recent weeks. I think Norwich are now a couple of points off the playoffs. Like, it feels like this is now the opportunity to go full steam ahead. Do you think that Johannes' team will take that opportunity and move forwards?
I hope so. I mean, as you map out there, they've got a hell of an opportunity. 5 of their next 7 at home. I think they play 2 teams in the top half: Sheffield Wednesday and Blackburn in this run of 7 as well. Obviously, one of those is away from home. So they've got a hell of an opportunity, a really, really good opportunity where the mood is good. And since I think the start of the year, really, they've basically doubled the amount of wins that they've got in the league. So they are in a good spot. They are finding some momentum, and there are maybe signs that actually some of the stuff that we saw in the first half of the season, that kind of the difficult moments and whatnot, there are sort of feelings that they're learning from that, and the additions to the squad, the returnees as well. I mean, they've only had, I think, 10 games this season where they've had Sargent, Sainz, Nunez and McLean available as a quartet. So it's incredible to think the position that they're in at the moment, really, given everything that's happened this season and given all of the two injury crises that they've had to deal with, really, and whatnot. The fact that they find themselves in sort of that pack, I think, is really encouraging. So yeah, they've got an opportunity. I think the feeling is good, and you can feel that around the place. And it's weird. I listened to your podcast. I thought you surmised it pretty nicely, actually, in terms of there is a feeling at the moment, and that's really hard to ignore and deny that there could be something happening here. And of course, nobody wants to get carried away or commit to that. But I think it's difficult to look at the run of games that they've got, look at the options that they've got in the squad, and feel anything but optimistic about where they find themselves in. And if they can get a really, park almost the 2 away games at the moment, if you look at this block of 5 home games that they've got coming up in their next 7, if they can record a very, very decent, points haul, and their home form this season suggests that they can, then they're going to find themselves, if not in the top 6, then very, very close to. And then that gives everyone a lot of energy, a lot of focus to what this end of season could be, compared to maybe what it felt like it might be in sort of December time. And we've done a few of these, and throughout all of them, I've sort of said I think it is bigger than getting to the playoffs. So I don't think it's the be all and end all for them. And in that regard, it probably applies a little bit less pressure to maybe than some of the teams around them. But I've got no doubt, and the data says it, and I think I said it maybe even on the last one after the Sheffield United and Leeds double header, that consistently now they are creating better opportunities than opposition in games, and they're conceding fewer as well. If they can keep that pattern going, they're going to get more points than they lose before the end of the season, and they're going to find themselves in a really good position. So, yeah, I think it should be, not could they? I think it could be what it should be. Maybe why not? Why can't they now? And that is a really, really exciting position to be in, even if, maybe we can get into a wider debate about if it's too early and whatnot on another show. But that feeling at the moment that everyone's got, and that optimism that everyone's got, is, really exciting to be a part of, and it's really refreshing.
And it's been nice, kind of just finally to see the kind of diversity in performances. I mean, we're a month into 2025, 2 1-0 away wins to Luton and Watford in actually fairly similar circumstances, where they had to dig and they had to fight and they had to be clever. And in both of those games, created nice opportunities as well. Norwich should have scored more than 1 goal at Vicarage Road. But I look back to maybe Cardiff, Cardiff way earlier in the season, and granted there were huge injury concerns kind of wrapping around that game, but they felt slightly naive at that point. And I'm not saying that that's completely fixed, of course it's not, and I'm sure we'll see more kind of disastrous away displays this season, but it feels like they're learning, and actually learning really quickly.
Yeah, I think definitely is the case, and we've seen that, I think, probably in the last month or so, where you can see, and probably as well a head coach that's learning. I think you can see that as well. You look at the 1-0 away wins at Watford last weekend, but also at Luton, and how maybe they've been slightly more, they've been built more of pragmatism maybe than ideology. There has been, clearly we all know how Norwich want to play, but there has been an acceptance that, at times in this league, you do have to roll your sleeves up. You can't blow every team away by 4 or 5, having 70% possession and whatnot. And I think that recognition has been really positive, because it can take coaches a long time to sort of recognise that. And the fact, I think, it's taken Torup and his team about half a season or so to really recognise that should be really encouraging. And that's, it's not to say you go 4-4-2 and you go long away from home and try and play completely differently. Norwich are trying to do similar things, and I actually felt Watford, particularly in the first half, was the most encouraging away performance that we've seen so far this season in terms of trying to do what they want to do. So I think we are seeing growth, and that's in individuals as well. Callum Fisher, for example, is consistently now performing at a very, very high championship level. Some of the signings as well that have made an impact. So I think we're seeing a young team really begin to probably harness some of that belief that is in the fan base at the moment, and beginning to grow as a team, and beginning to learn some of the methods that Torup wants to do. It's always going to take time to implement that, and it's always about sort of gradual steps. And I think probably Norwich, and I've said this on a few occasions as well, I think they probably should have more points based on what their performances have shown than they do. It's probably been, as you say, those bits around the edges that, the second halves against Sunderland, against Burnley, where, they were unable probably to build on a really good spell. It now feels like those longer spells are becoming more consistent, and those probably poorer ones are few and far between. And that's the place that they need to get to more consistently. And it's really positive that at this stage they've done it whilst having very few bodies available, and hopefully now they're supplemented with that, they can continue it and find a higher gear and kick on in some of these games that maybe are in the balance, like Swansea really, that are maybe are in the balance after 70. They can go and kill off now because they've got real quality to do that from the bench. So yeah, it's exciting, and I think people shouldn't be afraid to be excited by where Norwich City are and what they've got ahead of them. Of course, who knows how it will pan out, and it could be a total disaster from here. But when you have these moments in football, you've got to bottle them up and be really excited by what's to come. And I certainly am, and I think most people out there probably are as well. And if nothing else, they've given themselves a hell of an opportunity and a shot to get themselves into the playoffs. And yeah, I think everyone should get on board with that. Absolutely.
That's a lovely note to end on. There's certainly a fresh and, as you say, exciting feeling around the place. So long may it continue. Head over to the Pink 'Un. Their coverage of the transfer window was superb as always, and I'm sure it will continue throughout the rest of the season. Although, Connor, it feels like you need your own hashtag at some point, because Paddy's quickly becoming sort of Norfolk's Fabrizio. So you need to work on that personal branding, mate.
I'm happy for Paddy to have it. It's fine. Yeah, it was nice. I enjoyed seeing the No Circus as much as anyone on deadline day. So yeah, it's good.
There we go. Thanks very much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you all again very soon. Bye-bye.